Hey guys, thanks for joining me again. Mr. Durrell coming at you from Germany. We're in a very special place in a very special part of Germany called Potsdam. We are about 18 miles outside of Berlin, and the reason we're here is because on this very spot were gathered Joseph Stalin, Winston Churchill, and President Truman. And President Truman had just become president 3 months before this important meeting that was held right here in this beautiful spot. And the name of the conference was the Potsdam Conference. And the Potsdam Conference was meant to decide the fate of Europe following the end of World War II. When the big three met here, it was August of 1945. The war in Europe was over. The war in the Pacific was still going on. But the Soviet Union, the United States, France, and Great Britain were here to decide what should happen next as a result of defeating the Nazis just a few weeks before they all met here. And again, when Joseph Stalin had the last meeting in Yalta, he hosted the last meeting. He was pretty easygoing. He was very eager to please the Allies. He agreed to a lot of different outcomes at the end of the Second World War following victory in Yalta. And so when Churchill and Truman and Stalin got back together again here in Potsdam, everybody assumed that they would just carry on with the original agreement. Surprise, surprise, time changes things. And when Joe Stalin came here to Potsdam, he was a very different man, and he had very different ideas of what he wanted out of a victory in Europe. And his plan really surprised Truman and surprised Churchill, because all of a sudden Joe Stalin wasn't so eager to satisfy his allies. As a matter of fact, he was belligerent, and he demanded more of a Soviet presence in post-war Germany. He demanded a more Soviet presence in Eastern Europe. He gave no timetable of when his forces would ever leave all these conquered parts of the world. He was so incensed, and he wanted revenge for what the Nazis had done to the Soviet Union, that he felt it was his job to punish them, and he would do that in his own iron-fisted way. And Churchill and Truman were very, very shocked at the way Stalin acted. And at that point, both leaders realized that maybe this phase of the war had ended, and maybe there was going to be peace in the world, at least in Europe for now. But they understood very clearly that the next real problem they were going to be facing was the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was going to be a very, very adamant and tough foe to get enforced back into their homelands, into the Soviet Union. They had no plans to do that. Now, like I said at the beginning of this video, the Pacific War was still going on, and the American forces were fighting their way across the Pacific, island hopping on their way to the Japanese home islands. And Japan would quit in just a few weeks. And the reason the Japanese quit just a few weeks after this conference was held is because President Truman had to make one of the most difficult decisions a president can ever make, and that was to drop the atomic bomb. It was right here at this very conference, in fact, it was within these walls, that President Truman was notified that the Manhattan Project was a success and that there were 3 working prototypes of atomic weapons to try. And Truman wondered whether or not he should share this information with Joe Stalin. He told Winston Churchill that this weapon would be deployed under the right circumstances. And Truman decided to use this weapon as a little bit of leverage against the Soviet Union when he did agree to kind of let Joe Stalin know. And what he told Joe Stalin was that a new weapon that the United States had developed was ready to deploy. It was unlike any weapon anybody had ever seen, and he thought it would end the war very quickly. Now, Truman, by telling Joe Stalin this, thought that he would shock Joseph Stalin. He thought he would make him immediately wonder what the Americans were up to. But oddly enough, Truman's people said that Joe Stalin took this information rather blithely, that well, that's good. I hope it ends the war soon, is what he was reported to have said. He didn't seem to be all that interested in this new wonder weapon that President Truman was talking about. And the reason why is that Joe Stalin had already had two secret agents working within the Manhattan Project and already knew that the Americans were working on this atomic weapon, something that Joseph Stalin would always remember and want to get started on his own as soon as possible. Anyway, after a few weeks here in this wonderful place, the Allies and the Soviet Union broke up the meeting. The conference was at an end. And in the end, America and Great Britain decided to consolidate their forces in the western parts of Germany and hold on to those parts. It was also decided that it was in the Allies' best interests to hold on to the western half of the city of Berlin. And that meant that the United States, Great Britain, and France would hold the west sector of Berlin, where the Soviets would control the eastern sector. And this is what essentially divided the city of Berlin and ultimately divided the nation of Germany at the end of the Second World War. Why is that a problem? Well, Berlin sits deep inside Eastern Germany. So if you can imagine a city completely surrounded by the Soviet Union and half of a major city surrounded by the Soviet Union on the eastern side, you can understand why the Allies were anxious to hold on to this one section, because it represented really the only freedom that would be available in a post-war nation of Germany. And so that's what makes this place so incredibly special. Hey, thanks for coming along. Thanks.